This is square roots part 2. So we looked at perfect squares. We looked at perfect squares. We looked at what the notation looks like. We're going to talk a little bit more about this because as you saw with the perfect squares, it's not every single number. Not every number is a perfect square. You know, you have 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, next one would be 9, 16, 25, and then you know, you keep going. Well, if I take the square root of those numbers, let's just take 9 for instance. When I take the square root of 9, and guys, square root is a noun. It's not a verb. You don't square root something. All right? I can't take this. You take the square root of 9. You don't square root it. All right, I take the square root of 9, I'm going to be left with 3. Now, because 3 squared is 9. It's saying which number squared gives you that number that's underneath the bottom there. Well, there's also another number. There's also another answer that you could have got. The other number that you could square to get 9 is -3. So the square root of 9 actually has 2 answers to it. The square root of 9 is 3 and -3. All right, so when I am in class or someone says, what's the square root of 121? You don't say 11 or -11. You just say 11, okay? Well, like we know, we want you to understand the concept. We want you to understand the logic of what's going on here. You definitely need to know that there are a positive and a negative square root for every perfect square, for every the number that's under the radical. It has both a positive and a negative answer, okay? So let's take another one, for instance. Let's look at this example here. There you go. Okie dokie. Well, we don't have the square root of 9. Let's take the square root of 12. Which number multiplied by itself gives you 12? It ain't 6. All right? 6. That sign does not mean divide it by 2. That says which number squared gives you 12. What times what gives you 12? Well, the answer is not nothing either. The answer is not no solution. You can take the square root of 12, plug it in a calculator, it gives you this big old long crazy decimal. All right? And this is what that means. The square root of 12 is what we call irrational. It does not make any sense. Irrational. Irrational means it does not make sense. It's crazy. Square root of 12. When you put 12 and then you take the square root of 12 and you look in the calculator, it's going to give you a number and it goes on and on and on forever. It's a decimal, and you're like, well, decimals go on forever all the time. Well, this one's not going to repeat. Like the pattern's not going to repeat. It's not going to be like 341952, 3149152. It's going to be, you'll see what it's going to look like in just a second. All right, the square root of 12. Now, the directions are going to say, there's 3 sets of directions. The first one is going to say between which 2 whole numbers is the square root of 12. All right, so we got to narrow this down. We're trying to think like, yes, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us, but we could kind of figure out like where it would be. Square root of 12, let's look at the perfect squares of what we do have and figure out where 12 would go in between. So follow me along here. Stay with me. We have 1 times 1, 1. 2 times 2, 4. So we're going to say the square root of 1, the square root of 4, and the square root of 9, the square root of 16. And we can stop there because the square root of 12 is going to go in between the square root of 9 and the square root of 16. The square root of 12 is in between the square root of 9 and the square root of 16. Y'all see that? Because, 12 comes in between 9 and 16. All right, well, the square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 16 is 4. So if it says between which two whole numbers is it in between, it's in between 3 and 4 on the number line. If you were going to give a decimal, it'd be 3 point something. All right, we're going to get to that something in just a second, but if it says between which two whole numbers is the square root of 12, that's your answer, 3 and 4. You know, if it's multiple choice, it'd say 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5. You know, you just got to pick the one that says 3 and 4. Square root of 12, because that's in between the square root of 9 and square root of 16. All right? The next question, we'll call it number 2. Which integer is it closer to? Which integer is the square root of 12 the closest to? All right, or which whole number? So we could answer that just like we did the last question. Which two perfect squares is in between? You know, 1, 4, 9, 16, 36, 20, 40, 30, 36, 49. We know it's in between the square root of 9 and the square root of 16. Well, that's not what it's asking us. It's in between 3 and 4. That was the last question. This one's saying which one is it closer to? How far away is the 12 from the 9? You are 3 away right here. How far away is 12 from the 16? You're 4 away right here. Which one are you closer to? You're closer to this guy back here. You're closer to the 3. So if it said approximate to the nearest integer, you would say square root of 12, that's about 3. All right? Square root of 12, let me erase all this. You got all that, right? If I were to say which integer, round this to the nearest whole number, you'd say it's about 3. It's not. Because, you know, the square root of 9 is not, or the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 12 is going to be a number just a little bit over that, okay? But if it said which integer is it closer to, or round it to the nearest whole number, yeah, you'd say it's about 3, okay? All right, now, let's be our next example here. Square root of 12. We're going to round it to the nearest tenth, my little friends. Square root of 12, round it to the nearest tenth. Well, first we got to figure out which two perfect squares is in between, then figure out which two whole numbers is in between, figure out which one it's closer to, and then we're going to approximate the decimal. The nearest tenth is the first decimal place. All right, that's what we're worried about. So we've already said the square root of 12 is in between the square root of 9, the square root of 16. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4. If we have a number line going like this, here's 4, here's 3, down here is going to be 2, down there is going to be 5. If we wanted to round it to the nearest tenth, let's say our answer is going to go right here. We know it's going to be 3 point something because it's in between 3 and 4. Anything in between 3 and 4, I don't care how close you are to the 4, it's still going to be 3 point something. It will only be 4 point something if it was on the other side of 4. All right, so it's going to be 3 point something. Go ahead and put that there now. Like, you don't want to forget that. We just got to come up with that something. We got to figure out what this part is, you know. So square root of 9 is square root of 12. We already said you are 3 square roots away. You know what I mean? Like square root of 10, square root of 11, square root of 12. You're 3 away. And then from 12 to 16, you're 4 away. Now I want you to think about this. I just want you to look at the black writing right here. Imagine you're standing in line. Here's the front of the line. Here's the back of the line. And you have 4 people in the front. You have 3 people in the back. Are you at the front, the middle, or the back of that line? If you have 4 people in front of you and 3 people behind you, you're about in the middle. You know, I wouldn't say you're at the back because you still have 3 people behind you. Like, in relationship to how many total people there are, if you have 4 people in front of you and there's a total of 7 people, you're about in the middle. So you're going to pick the decimal that's going to be right here in the middle. What decimal would that be right in the middle? You'd say 3.5. All right, and that is an approximation. When I take the square root of an irrational number, or when I take the square root of a non-perfect square, so this is 12, and I'm going to take the square root of that, it gets 3.46410161513277754 blah 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 blah. 3.46. We had 3.5. Well, that's 6. We'd round that 4 up to a 5, hence giving it 3.5. All right. You just estimated it to the nearest tenth. We're going to try one more. Okay, let's do this one. This one's going to be rounding it to the nearest tenth. Square root of 77. You're not dividing by 2, all right? Get that out of your heads. The square root of 77, you're going to look to see which 2 perfect squares is in between. That's the very first and foremost thing that we're going to do. We're going to say square root of 77 is in between which 2 perfect squares. Well, it's not between the square root of 9 and square root of 16. Got to keep going. So I would say down your side of your piece of paper, if you're doing these, have your perfect squares written down. 6 times 6, 36. 7 times 7, 49. 8 times 8, 64. 9 times 9, 81. Oh, there we go. 64. That's a 6 and a 4. Hey, there we go. It's in between 64 and 81. More importantly, it's in between the square root of 64 and the square root of 81. Now, which 2 whole numbers is it in between? Well, square root of 64 is 8. Square root of 81 is 9. There we go. We know it's in between 8 and 9. So if down here is where our answer is going to go, you're going to say it's going to be 8 point something because it's in between 8 and 9. It's going to be in between the 8 and the 9. All right? So it's going to be 8 point something. Now, how we get this point something, because there is a right and wrong answer for this, you know, there's going to be right here in the middle is 5. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 8.1 all the way up through 8.9. We're going to pick one of those. So you only got 9 to choose from. All right? 8.1 all the way through 8.9. If it's closer to the 8, you're going to pick either 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, and you're going to use the best approximation you can get, depending on how close you are to the back of that line. Or you're going to use 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, 8.9, depending on how close you are to the front of the line. Having said that, 64 to 77. How many square roots away are we? Well, let's see. 64 to 70, that would be 6, and then 7 plus 6, you'd be 13 square roots away. So you have 13 people behind you in this line. Well, how many people do we have in front of us? 77, anyway, we have 4 people in front of us. You're standing in a line. You're at the movies. You have 4 people in front of you, and you have 13 people behind you. You have 4 people in front of you. So here's you. And you have 4 people, and then 13 people behind you. Are you at the front, the middle, the back? You're at the front of that line, my friends. You're at the front, son. All right? Now, you're not as close as you could get, but you are almost there. Like, you can just start reading what movies there are, you know? So, now how much it costs you. So, you're at the front of the line. Now, if you're not all the way at the front of the line, I'd kind of like, yeah, you're about like right there. Well, what decimal is that? Some kids say 8.7. Some kids 8.8. I'll take both. You know, I'll take both of those because they're both good answers. What I wouldn't take is 8.1. What I wouldn't take is 9.7. What I wouldn't take is red. You know, like you just got to come up with the decimal that's pretty close. All right, that's why it says approximate, round. You're guessing. All right, well, you're making an educated guess. Yes, you're kind of approximating, and yes, there are wrong answers to this. Let's take a look at how close we got. Clear. So if we have square root of 77, and let's see what that gives us. 8.77. Didn't we say it was between 8.7 and 8.8? 8.77 is really right in between 8.7 and 8.8. Okay, little children, have fun with that. Let's try these. Y'all try this. Insert blank page. I want you to try these on your own, please. And we'll use our fun little marker here. Square root of 2. We'll save that one for the end. Square root of 15. Square root of 130. Square root of 82. Square root of 220. Square root of 2. And the negative square root of 50. Notice how I put that negative sign on the outside of the radical symbol. Until you get into 11th grade, you can't have a negative sign under the radical sign. All right, that means I got to go. Do the next thing. I believe in you.